give a lot of credit to Cristobal, man. In 4 years' time, he's done a tremendous job as well. And like that Miami team has direction now. It's found its identity again. I thought it was great for college football last night. It was a win for college football because one, it wasn't a blowout. It was a competitive game. I thought it was a competitive game against a powerhouse, a legendary, storied powerhouse program in Miami, and a newcomer. But I was really, I sent y'all the picture, of me with Coach. I went to visit them maybe 2 off seasons ago, like maybe 1 off season ago. Anyway, and I hung out with them at the facility, and you could tell they were building something special there. Jason Taylor, the way he has the defensive line playing, I mean, all the amounts of pressures that they had, the hits that they had, and some maybe illegal, but I thought that it's a very commendable job that Cristobal did. I mean, he took Oregon and turned them into a more competitive program, and then they've continued to build from there. I thought that it should be stated that even though in a loss, nobody likes to lose. You don't want to see your team lose. And there's no really feeling good when you lose the biggest game. Sometimes you'd probably rather not be in the biggest game and lose that one versus losing in it. But I thought that Miami had a whale of a season, man. They came out of the ACC, so they represented you would assume that it would be an all Big Ten championship or an SEC Big Ten championship. They were the team that emerged out of a different conference that made it to the game. And I thought that this year's bracket, the brackets were, I don't know about you guys, but I didn't think that it was like last year. And I'll be the first one to say, I feel like Penn State benefited from a very easy, manageable path to getting to where they were able to get to, one game away from the championship. But I thought this was a pretty competitive field this year. Outside of the early games, obviously, but outside of that, I thought these were competitive matchups, and to see how it played out in Miami, get through it and be in the championship game, I just felt like they deserved to get some flowers today as well, even though they lost.
Well, I would say this: there's a lot there. Starting with where you ended with Miami, I would actually look at it a little bit different. They've been one of the most well-funded NIL programs over the past few years. And I think up until this year, if you asked Miami fans, they would say they're probably a little bit disappointed with not seeing greater results for the spend and for the talent they have and everything else. So this was a big year for them in like proving that Mario Cristobal can be the guy. The big question now moving forward for them is Carson Beck obviously moves on. They'll have both edge rushers move on. They've got another, a group of players who will be moving on, who to me were the backbone and the foundation of their success this year. So I think that's the hard part is then being able to reload and build off of that and then find whoever that next quarterback is. Maybe it's Darian Mensah, the quarterback out of Duke. It was rumored that obviously he had signed a deal with Duke, but now he was trying to get out to be that next guy at Miami, which if that's the case, awesome for him and awesome for Miami because he's a hell of a player. But I would actually say just from living down there and being around that program and some of the folks there too at the Orange Bowl, I think there was a little bit to be desired up until this year, which was obviously a ton of fun.
And I had heard that. I did hear that, and I'm aware of it, but I just think he maintained the course. Like just talking to him and listening to him, he maintained the course.
I think anyone who talks to Mario Cristobal comes away with loving the man that he is, and that you'd want your son to play for him, and you feel like he's a leader of men. Like that was my first impression of him when he took the job. I would go back on the Oregon thing. Like he was fine at Oregon, but like Dan Lanning's been better. Oregon was
much better.
way more developed before he got there, right? I mean, you're talking about going through the years, like obviously Chip Kelly and Helfrich, even those years where people tend to forget Mark Helfrich played for a national championship like that. They had Oregon rolling for a while. So I don't know that I look back on the Oregon years as much other than, it kind of allowed him to get back to Miami, a place he's familiar with, a place that he played at, which makes a ton of sense. And I think he's brought in a lot of pride back to the program. So we'll see what Miami does too. They're playing in a conference that allows them right now, I think, a clear path because the ACC has been pretty weak. But I think the other thing you touched on is just obviously the 12-team playoff format. They made adjustments to who those 4 teams would be that got the bye, and that's played out to be more competitive quarterfinal games, which is what we were lacking last year, right? We kind of had some maybe better first-round games, but then weaker quarterfinal matchups at times because some of the teams that got to play through, Boise, for example, being a group of 6, but being able to get a bye. So there's different reasons, I think, for why it was a little bit more competitive after that first round. And I think people have to take into account this. If it expands, which it feels like based on the news, coming out of the past 24 hours, the Big Ten and the SEC can't, agree on what that expansion looks like. So it's probably going to be 12 teams for another year because the SEC wants 16 and the Big Ten wants 24, and we can talk about that another day as to why that is. But you're going to get blowouts. You're going to get mismatches. You're going to get bad games. And I think if you look at the national championship, to your point of it being a close competitive game, I think the average margin of victory is about 19 points per national championship game, at least during the playoff era. And part of the reason for that, obviously, was the drumming that TCU got when they got beat by Georgia. But the reality is even if you take that game out, it's probably still, not overly competitive or over a touchdown. So it was a great result to a college football season and to a sport that, there's no doubt they've got its faults. It's at an odd time where we enter now into the offseason where it becomes even more transparent, the issues that college football is facing. But at least the game, at least the product on the field is still as compelling as ever. And I think Indiana's win gives every program hope. And at the same time puts a lot of pressure on a lot of blue blood programs as to what are we doing, and why are we not doing or implementing things that they're doing? How are they able to do what they were able to accomplish this year? We've seen it before in college basketball, but to see it in college football, it's a new day, a new age, and it's incredible to see what Indiana's been able to do.
Yeah, it was a fun game last night. Just especially the way that it closed, the Mendoza play, Indiana and that fan base, and them coming out to that game and paying the ungodly prices they did to get out there and take that stadium over, and to have Miami back on the big stage was awesome. Mario Cristobal, the head coach, spoke though following the game about his disappointment.
What did you say to your team in the locker room just now?
That's a really resilient, tough, just really special group of human beings. They've been elite competitors. They've been the best thing that's happened to the University of Miami and the community in 25 years. They turned around a program that, I'm really kind of at a loss for words. It was, let's just say that it's very real. We let one slip away. Credit to Indiana, great football team. Really a tremendous amount of respect for them. But our guys never stopped battling. Resiliency was awesome, like always. And at the end, we had a turnover. It's a really difficult time there.
Keep your head up, Coach. Kept it within the number. That's what's important here on this show.
I was going to say, some of us on
Quinn's
were very pleased with how that all worked out.
I thought they would cover.
Hey, Carson, who cares about the INT?
Wins.
That's a twofer right there, folks. If you had to pick it early like I did, you got an 8.5, and you got the under of 48.5, which just snuck in there.
Carson, what are you worried about the interception for? As long as it wasn't a pick six. That's all anybody cares about.
Come on.
And which, by the way, we didn't mention Mendoza. We talked about how he was brought in, not the most coveted of transfer portal players, but Beck would be considered to possibly have been the most valued player in the portal last offseason.
They went above and beyond to bring him in.
I was there.
Yeah,
I was with them when they were doing the deal. The people who do the deals, I was with them because we were playing in Miami. That was the weekend that was the Orange Bowl week when they brought them in.
Well, is that because there wasn't an SEC team last year in the semifinals for the playoff? Again, for the third straight year, we basically had is that what you're alluding to?
Well, I wasn't alluding to. I mean, I was just saying that we were there.
Well, that's why they could do the deal because obviously Georgia
because they weren't there.
They
They weren't. Yeah, they weren't. Yeah, I mean, I didn't pay attention to all of that. I know I was with the guys who got the guys, and they got it done. And well, anyway, you saw two contrasts in styles in terms of how to build your team. Miami has been more high profile with who they brought in. You get a Beck, he's a high profile transfer portal guy. Mendoza wasn't. You look at these guys on Indiana, it almost had Fiesta Bowl, Miami and Penn State on it. It almost had convicts versus Catholics written on it. Like, it really was contrast and styles of what, even when they were coming out to the field, just watching this different way they came out. I don't know if you guys were paying attention to little stuff like that, but Miami came out bopping. Like, they was on the bounce. They had the music playing. Indiana came walking through. Like,
when you showed the fan bases in the crowd, you could tell if they didn't matter what they were wearing, you could tell who's rooting.
And Indiana did show up.